We are going to give, especially our guests who are coming from different faiths and religions, my team, we are going to give them roses and chocolates. We will do it later. My next speaker, very kindly, he came with a wholehearted and very kindly, Mr. Chris Penberry. He has to go a little bit earlier, that's why Mr. Chris, I'm requesting you to come first and say a few words.
Thank you very much. I have to leave early because I have a governor's meeting. I'm the chair of governors at my son's school. The school is 70%.
It's not in Birmingham, is it?
No, I'm going to come on to that. Because one of the fallouts of the Birmingham case is I think being a parent governor is a very important job. I suspect as a result of this, there will be fewer candidates to become a parent governor as a consequence of what those people in Birmingham have been subjected to as governors and teachers. But I want to echo a point. I was listening to the news this morning and two stories made my heart bleed. The first story was, of course, where our guest mentioned of Iraq. And I just want to say something because the way it is presented here, as if it is an issue of religion and religious conflict. In this very building in 1916, a British civil servant and a French civil servant met to divide the lands of Syria, Iraq and Palestine between Britain and France. And they drew the borders which were agreed at the Treaty of San Remo later on, which today define those countries. The way it has been presented here is what is happening in Iraq, as I said in the introduction, is somehow a religious issue of Muslims killing Muslims. This is a consequence, I have to say, of political decisions taken by the West, beginning in 1916 and continuing all the way through to the occupation of Iraq by the Americans, which instituted in colonial style a divide and rule policy, which in an Ireland we never lived. And to blame it on the people of Iraq, to blame it on Muslims is wrong, and it is a cop-out, I believe, by the West and by the people who are ultimately responsible for the terrible mess that we are seeing in the Middle East today. And I think we have to say it has nothing to do with Islam, it has nothing to do with the Muslims itself, it is a consequence of decisions made in buildings like this. And the second issue, as has been referenced, is that the fallout from the Birmingham school. I would advise everyone to read the piece in The Guardian today by Commenters' Free piece by Seamus Milne, who points out that this issue is nothing to do with so-called terrorism. There is not a shred of evidence, if any evidence has been presented, to do with terrorism. He argues this is an issue of religion. He does say that in some of the schools they may have pushed it too far, but he actually goes through a number of things that it is common, for instance, for PE to be segregated on a gender basis. There is no evidence have come through in this, and these schools are being picked on as a consequence of being one religion. He also quotes the current Secretary of State for Education, writing in support of the notorious Samuel Huffington's thesis of a clash of civilizations. Now, I want to just say something as a historian. When I hear the clash of civilizations theory, somehow the West is more advanced than the Islamic countries. The first thing I want to do is quote actually Mahatma Gandhi when asked about European civilization. His response was, good idea. But also I think it rules out the issue that we have to treat each other with respect and we have to have some knowledge. Islam has been part of Europe since almost the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Islam brought civilization and preserved civilization in Europe when Europe was involved in what was called the Dark Ages. Al-Andalus was a cradle of civilization. Islamic Syria was a cradle of civilization in Europe. You cannot talk about the Renaissance which took place in Italy and elsewhere without the contribution that was made by those countries. I also look at some of the things which happened in Europe. Where was it that, for instance, the Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal found refuge? They did not find refuge elsewhere in Europe. They found it in the lands of the Ottoman Empire and Muslim lands because there was religious toleration. And I think it's worth saying something that actually the religious toleration continued all the way through virtually to the end of the Ottoman Empire. I'm not defending the Ottoman Empire, but it was relatively religiously tolerant, particularly in comparison to what was happening elsewhere in Europe at the time. And the collapse of that had dreadful consequences all around the world. And I think we have to take into account history here in terms of that. That when we talk about interfaith religion, we have to respect each other's religions, or even lack of religion. But I think we also have to know our history here. And I, for one, am not prepared to see Islam being Tipex out of the history of Europe. Muslims have always been here from, as I say, the days of the Prophet, and they have made a contribution. I also have to say, as a Scot, you may pick up from my accent, the contribution of Islamic lands feeding back into our civilization, particularly from the Indian subcontinent, simply cannot be removed. It is there in every element of British life. So I want to end by saying this. I am absolutely for religious toleration and friendship. It has to be based on respect. And I do feel, sadly, as a non-Muslim, that at the moment what we're seeing, particularly in the case of the Birmingham schools, is one religion being picked out unfairly. And I believe it has an Islamophobic agenda. And unfortunately, Islamophobia has been a constant, as one friend, academic put it, it's a constant white noise in British and Western society. It's a constant continuation since, unfortunately, since the tragic events in 9/11, which again, I believe, had nothing to do whatsoever with religion in the concept flowed from political ideas. So, Chair, I thank you for inviting me today. I thank you for being here, and I wish you all the best of luck in your endeavours.
Thank you very much, Shakir. It was wonderful. It was